Welcome to the Neo introduction video for software version 3.9. There are hundreds of feature improvements and enhancements, so dive in and learn what's new with Neo. The first time you start the software, it will run this welcome screen which gives you the options of basic mode, advanced mode, and to play introduction video. Basic mode will hide most of the configuration options available and set appropriate defaults to get you started quickly and simply. Advanced mode will display all available software options and is designed for experienced users. Or you can dive right in and play the introduction video. Just make sure you have speakers or headphones plugged into either the front or rear audio jack. The front jack is to the right of the keyboard. We're going to go into basic mode. Now that the software is launched, let's get started. So this is our live screen or our main screen. If you look at it, the primary area here is your classic view channel grid. This will show you the most traditional theatrical view of your channels and what they are controlling from the patch. On top, you have a series of buttons all across the top that are commands, and some of these have a little arrow in the corner, which means they have a pull down, which will show you advanced commands within that particular topic. All of the command buttons at the top are grouped with commands of a like kind. So the first grouping are the selection buttons. And you have select active, clear selected, select last, next, and a selection pull down. The next grouping is about levels. So you've got on, out, home, fan, and highlight. Next is park, undo, and release. Then we get into recording. So record group, record cue, update cue, record effects, record palette. Then we have our effects library groups and palettes collection. And then we have view and copy. Now let's move over to our sidebar, the area on the right side of your screen. There are several components to this. If you look at the very top, there are tabs. So there's a fixture control tab and a current playback tab. Current playback is going to show you your cues. Additional tabs will appear that are context sensitive, so it depends upon what you're doing within the software. For example, if you have an effect running in a cue, there'll be a tab for that, and there are some additional ones as well, so look for that. The next line here shows you the default information. This is in yellow text so that it can stand out for you. Currently we're set to record live, meaning it will record everything that's outputting. Tracking mode, which is a selection option for how the cue information tracks into additional cues when you're recording. Mark late. Marking determines how the moving lights and LEDs prepare their parameter information before they're needed. Then you have three indicators here for effects, subs, and palettes. These are toggles. They can be turned on or off as needed just by clicking them. And they indicate what gets stored when you record a cue. So for example, if you have an effect that's running and you want to record that into the cue, you would want to make sure that that's identified as yellow. Currently the effect indicator is on, the palette indicator is on, so that when you record a cue it would include references from palettes, but information coming from submasters is currently turned off. Next you have your indicator of what playback you are editing and the cue list that's assigned to the playback. So we're on our master playback. We only have a single cue list, which is there by default. To the right of that, you have a properties button for the cue list. So this is where you can quickly change the name. You can determine whether tracking is enabled during playback. It is on by default. The behavior of the cue list, and there are different options here. LTP means last takes precedence, so that will always be in charge. Highest takes precedence, or a mix of intensity, highest takes precedence, and attributes are last takes precedence. In addition, there's some other options here. New in 3.9 is the ability to assign shortcuts to go, stop, back, and reset of the cue list. You can also assign submasters to executing the cue list inhibiting the levels coming from cues in this cue list, or a rate submaster that will increase or decrease the timing of the cue list. The main body is where the list of cues will appear. Below you have action buttons to run, go, stop back, and reset the cue list. Then you also have the name of the show, the date, and the time to the right. Now at the bottom of your main monitor, you have your command line. The command line is where it will display text-based or action-based information that you type in by pressing the keys. This is generally felt to be a faster way to interface with the desk as opposed to using the buttons and the commands at the top. To the left of the command line will be the identifier for the command line. Currently we're in the live screen. The command line is available in a number of screens, and it will identify those screens based upon which one you're displaying. To the left of that is the Strand icon. This will allow you to go in and see your command history list. You can press it again to come back out. To the right of the command line are modifiers for master fade time, for your shortcut page, for the active submaster page, and the active playback page. Along the very bottom are a list of display options as buttons. Some of these are pull downs. Alright, the first few are self-explanatory. New show, Lotus Save Show, Save and Save As. Save a Copy is new and allows you to do things like saving a file to a USB stick without moving the file pointer so it doesn't move your save command location. Pack Show Files and Settings will allow you to pack everything regarding the console and the show file. So system settings, image files, my interface files, everything will get packed so that you can clone it to another system. Some of these I'm going to skip over as they're not common. Backup Now is a great one to just back up your file to your automatic backup settings. Restore Show, manuals and documentations for the fixture editor, the user guide or the manual, and the quick start guide. About Neo to show you the version number. It's great for seeing the version number. And lock, restart, and shut down the desk. So all of the different displays are available with buttons along the bottom. You also have hard keys on your console. You have a display tile above your trackball. So we'll start with live. This is the main screen. This is the one that we've been looking at so far. This will show you your live outputs. So if you have output on stage, this is where you will see the information. Blind, this is where we look at data that is not active or live. So you'll see an indicator in front of the command line that identifies this as blind. You go to a gray background, it tells you blind top right of the sidebar for blind on cues. After that we have our groups display. This has been redone in 3.9. Everything is touch friendly in the pull downs, and anything that was a pop-up window has now been shifted to tabs within the detail window. So I'm going to use the close button to close that window. I'm going to go back to live just because it's always good practice to stay on the live screen, and we shall look at cue lists. Cue list also has been revamped, so again, all touch-friendly pull downs. Anything that was previously giving you a pop-up menu has been put into the details window at the bottom as a tab, so all of that is more accessible now. We'll close this and we'll go to the effect list. This will show you a list of all your effects. The different categories are here. We don't have any built yet, so I'll show you the library effect. Here's the list of effects from the library. We'll close this window, and if we select the palettes button, either on the hardware here, you'll get a list of your palette windows that will pop up. These will be floating windows. From here we can go into Patch. Patch will show us the fixtures and their addresses and where they are assigned. I will close that window. Some of these displays are more common than others. Cue playbacks will show you the playbacks for your cues. Effects playbacks will show you playbacks for the effects. We'll go in the macro editor. This will show you macros and where they can be edited. We have three different types of macros: a more traditional macro, which is just keystroke entry. We have variables, and we also have conditional events. DMX View is a great way to troubleshoot output on the console to identify what is being controlled. Submasters are for virtual submasters. Shortcuts is a page for all of the shortcuts that you have assigned. System properties, and the more pull down. Some of these are more common than others. I'll just go over the more common ones. Control panel, where you can pull up the control panel. You have four environments on the left: startup, application, system, and maintenance for different system items. You can also edit fixture library, edit matrices, profiles, window layout manager, where you can store your window layouts. There is now a system default screen which will store everything back to default. The last thing on the screen layout is your window layout manager's buttons. So any window layout that you save will appear in this list, and you can expose or retract it at any time. Alright, let's go into system properties while in basic mode and talk about all of the basic options that are here. So basic settings. For those of you familiar with Neo, this is a new layout. It's a much more touch-friendly layout. You've got DMX output options, so you can set your protocol device if you're communicating DMX over Ethernet. You've got your DMX console ports on the back of the desk, and this is the universe that each of the ports are assigned to: ports 1, 2, 3, and 4. Over here we have system settings, what the on level will do. The up-down buttons are currently set to 5%. Your grandmaster buttons are disabled, and those are your different options that you can set to. You've got an A/B fader mode for your master playback, and those are your options there. Turning on a preset fader mode, show command line syntax help. This is where your automatic file backup services are, which I recommend you leave your first location as is, set your second location with the folder button to a USB key. This will store backups every 5 minutes, and it will keep 10 of them. Your queue list default times, uptime and downtime. Your default tracking mode, queue only tracking, and the mixed version of queue only applying to intensities and tracking applying to attributes. You've got AutoMark, where it will default to being set as late as possible. Those are your other options. You can have it mark in queue time or not. And to the right here, this is whether it's going to include these different items when you're recording queues. So does it include effects, levels from subs, and palettes when recording this information? In addition, here in the basic system properties, you can play the introductory video. Alright, let's look at starting a new show file with Neo. So if we do the options pull down and say new show, now we have a fresh show file, and it will give you the name of the show here bottom right, and it says unnamed show. Alright, next we're going to go into patch, and we're going to talk about the changes that basic mode give you in patch. First thing, I like to move this vertical bar so that I get a relative 50-50 split on my screen between my fixture table and my output grid. You also may find that your fixture window bottom right is taking up either too little or too much room. So I recommend you move that to a manageable size for you as well. So the visible columns is one of the areas that is truncated when you're in patch, so that there are only certain columns that are available. You can obviously turn on or off anything you want or don't need based upon the check marks. So we're now going to talk about patch while we're here in the patch window. And we're going to start by patching standard generic channels or intensity channels or conventional channels, whatever you want to call them. So if we look at our table to the left, we can see that we have a one-to-one patch assignment for the fixture and the patch address or the output number. So I can use page to page down, shift page to page up to see what I have. Typical patch syntax is channel at output enter. You will see there's a switch here where you could reverse that if you wish, but we generally recommend that you stay in channel and output. So the first thing is to learn how to unpatch a channel if we want to get rid of its assignment. So if I do 1 at enter, that will remove the assignment for channel 1. Now I can also do this for a range of channels. So if we're starting to patch our show, we may want to remove all the patch assignments so that we can start fresh. Now my system is currently set up for 1,000 channels, so I can do 1 through 1,000 at enter, and that will clear out the patch. Now if I want to page back up, instead of doing shift page many times, I can just do channel number enter. So I'll just do 1 enter, and that will page me back up. From here, what I want to do is patch 100 addresses to a 1-to-1 patch for my channels, and this will give me essentially a rounded off version of a rack of dimmers. So I'm going to do 1 through 100 at 1 enter, and that will give me a 1-to-1 assignment for the first 100 channels. So I'm going to go back to the top, so I'll do 1 enter, and from here I want to show you and look at a great feature that Neo has, which is the ability to add label information on your live screen for position, purpose, and color. So we're going to start here in position, and I'll just click in there, and I will start typing on my external keyboard. I'm going to label this position based upon the light plot where the first addresses are out in the front of house in my cove position. So I'm going to start with cove, and I'm going to do shift down arrow to copy this down to 1 through 9, because in my system, my theoretical system, we're going to have 9 areas or 9 channel numbers. So I'm going to start with in purpose, and 1 through 9 are going to be my warm area light. So I'm just going to talk in warm fronts and copy that down. And now I'll come over, I'm going to bypass color description and come into color, and I'm going to put in the gel number for this, which I'll do Roscoe 305, so capital R 305, and copy that down. To see what this does, we can go back to our live screen. We'll say we want to save this, and now we can see the information that we have here. So what I'm going to do now is go back in the patch. I'm going to finish up some labeling so that we treat this a little like a cooking show. So I've gone in and finished up some labeling of front light, pipe ends, and 2 colors of backlight, so that we have this set up, and we go to live, and there are our labels. Alright, there are times when you need direct dimmer control as opposed to channel control, because you have an output that you just need to identify. It's a great way to help do troubleshooting as well. So if I want to give a dimmer value, there's a dimmer key top left on your console, so I can say dimmer 53 full, and now that dimmer has been assigned a value. I see bottom right I have a flag that says dimmers unpatched, because what is needed to be understood is that when you give a dimmer assignment, it is no longer able to be controlled by the channel, because this overrides that. So effectively the dimmer is unpatched. If we want to go to the DMX view, we can see that dimmer 53 is at DMX value 255, so it's effectively unpatched. Now I can use next and last to identify the output that I need, and then I can patch it up or do whatever I need to do with it. When you are, I'm going to close the DMX view, when you are done with all of that, what you need to do to put everything back to the way it was, just hit dimmer twice, and that will restore all dimmers back to whatever else is patched. Now a dimmer does not change its output just by going and doing something else. You can also have multiple outputs that are unpatched at once. You just need to put them back when you're done before you can move on to normal programming. Alright, now let's talk about selection shortcuts. Selection shortcuts use the data that we put in patch in the position, purpose, and color column in order to create automatically created groups for you. If you press the select button above your command tile, you will see that in the All tab there will display a list of all the selection shortcuts that have been built automatically for you. So if I want to take advantage of this, I can say, you know what, I would like to turn on my cool fronts. So I can select the cool fronts, and we're going to put those at 50%. Now I would like to turn on, I'll hit the select button again, all of my R68 fixtures, which are my blue backs, and let's put those at 30%. And I would now like to select all of my cove fixtures, and we're going to go up 10%, and now I can record this as a cube. So the whole point of selection shortcuts is to minimize the need for building group and allow you to call up fixture groupings based upon real-world information of position, purpose, and color. Alright, if not already in patch, let's go to patch and let's look at patching up some LEDs. So first we want to understand that while patching happens here on the command line, it patches based upon the fixture make model information that is here. So we need to set the right fixture type first. What we want to do is patch a silicon PL1 profile Mark II. So there's two ways of going about it. I could just type in PL profile and I get a list where I can go up and look at the PL Profile 1 Mark IIs, and I select 16-bit, and that has been assigned. The other way to go about it is to navigate up and down the manufacturer list until you find the right manufacturer, and then go in the list, open it up, and go in and select the right fixture. Either method works the same way. So what we want to do is we want to patch the next set of technology into the next hundreds, because we've done 1 through 100. So I'm just going to do 101 enter, and that will page us down so we can see the next available channel. And we want to patch 10 of the PL Profile 1 Mark IIs. And we want to start the addressing in the second universe, first address. So we're going to say 101 through 110 at 2.1, enter. And there they are, and they're patched. We'll go ahead and label position information. We'll say this is front of house, and we'll go to purpose, and we'll call these PL profiles, and copy that down. So we'll go back live, enter to save the patch, and now we have our new fixtures patched. Alright, now that we've got our fixtures patched and we're back in live, let's take a look at navigating around the screen. Let's make sure we're set up the way we want to be. So my sidebar, I've got it about the right width so that I get 20 channels wide, which allows everybody to line up in logical order. I don't currently see my attribute window, so I'm going to go into view, and we're going to stay in the classic view. When we're in basic mode, the view pull down options are limited to simplify it. So we're going to say open a split view of channels, and we're going to turn on the intelligent light ML view, and that allows us to see our attributes down here. I look up at my defaults. I'm setting on record live. I'm in tracking, and currently marking is turned on. It's going to mark as late as possible. When I record cues, it will include effects that are running, any references to palettes, but it will not include levels from submasters. That's the way I like to be set up. I've saved the show file. It's called Neo 3.9, and we're ready to go. Alright, let's talk about channel control. We have some channels up from earlier work. So let's just start by release. We're going to hit the release key once. That's going to release everything. The release key actually has two states. It can release currently what is selected and then release everything else. So let's take a look at bringing up channels. And let's look at basic channel controls. So I can say 1 full. Channel 1 is selected. It has been changed to full. I know it's selected by the red box around the channel block. I know its level has been changed for the red background on the white text for the level information. If I now say to on is a level key in system properties. You can set it for whatever value you wish. So we'll go into system properties and we can see the on level, and it's currently set to 100%. So notice 2 is selected, 1 has been adjusted but is not selected. So I can change level to what is selected by doing at a value enter. So I've gone at 5 enter. Notice the parentheses value beside the current level, that's the history level, so that shows you the level that it was at beforehand. Notice I did at 5 enter. I did not provide the 0. It sets that automatically for you, so it assumes the second digit is 0. That doesn't mean I still can't put in a second digit, so I could do at 60 enter. The point is it doesn't change until you get the enter key, which is like the period on the end of a sentence. I could also say at 45 enter, and again it will change to that. There are the 3 auto-completing keys of full, on, and out. That's the only one we haven't looked at yet. So those are auto-completing, meaning they will complete the command the moment that it is pressed. You do not have to wait for an enter key for that. The other thing you have is top right on your desk. You have a level wheel, so you can roll the level up and down. You also have on your advanced tile to the right of your command tile 2 keys that say up and down. These are not the arrow keys, these are actually keys that say up and down. And up goes up in increments of 5%, down goes in increments of 5%, and again in system properties you can change that to whatever value you like. Most people prefer either 5% or 10%. That's the basics of channel control. I'm going to show you the example of release a couple of times here. So release will release what is selected. I press release again, it will release everybody that's been adjusted. You can do wonderful things like use the combination of through, plus, and minus to select any combination of channels you want. So I could say 1 through 9 plus 11 through 19 minus 15. And there I have 1 through 9, 11 through 14, and 16 through 19. I'm going to release, and those are now released. I can also range channels. So I could say 1 through 9 at 10 through 90, enter, and that will range those values across those channels. Now let's talk for a moment about channel control for the LEDs. First thing is I'm going to do 101 through enter. Notice I did not put in the end channel, but 101 through enter will start at 101. It will go through to all the channels that are patched, or it will stop if you've got a channel gap or a fixture type change. So that's a quick and easy way to grab those fixtures. I'm going to put them at full so we see output. LEDs are going to default to all emitters at full. And if I go here in my sidebar, I have gone away from the current playback tab to the fixture control tab. And within that I have tabs for intensity, color, and utility. So we're going to focus on color for a minute. You also have keys above your command tile in your selection attribute tile which allow you to access the different attribute families. So I could go to intensity by pressing that hard key, or color by pressing that hard key, and it will follow suit in the sidebar. Now here I have faders that I can control on screen. So I can move these faders up and down to select color. I also have encoders on the desk that have the same assignment. So I can modify these individually per encoder. When in 16-bit mode, you'll notice on the encoders that there is DMEX information on the right, and there's two numbers. The top one is the 8-bit number, or the coarse value. The bottom one is 16-bit number, or the fine value. So you can control this in fine mode by holding Shift and running those encoders, and that will adjust just the 16-bit number, so it moves very, very, very slowly, or in a fine. Now you also have a color picker that you can pick here. We can open up the generic color chooser, and you get to pick which color space you want to use. So there's hue, saturation, and intensity, red, green, blue, CMY. You can pick on the picker here. You can move the sliders up and down. You also have them matching on your encoders. You can also pick color from gel filters. So if you know you want to go to Roscoe 68, I could type @color, and then it's going to look for a numerical equivalent to the gel manufacturer. And we have the four basic ones in here: Apollo, GAM, Lee, and Roscoe, and they are in alphabetical order. So if I want Roscoe, that's the fourth library, so I can say 4 dot and then put in the color number 68. You can even range color. I could say @color 4.68 through 4.312, and that will range the color across. Alright, we're going to learn about recording cues. So I've got some levels up on my conventional channels as well as on the LEDs. I've selected a color, and we're going to look at the basic 4-keystroke method for recording. Now I'm going to hit the record key, and I'm going to pause there because it's important that we make sure that we're on our current playback, and the record key will do that automatically for us. And we're going to look at a couple of things here. Remember our defaults. So up at the top, record live. So this is important. It's going to record live, or everything that's outputting over the network based upon your patched channels. We also have soft keys that now appear above your command line that you can access should you need to help you record this information. So I'm going to do the classic 4-key approach of record cue. As soon as I hit cue, notice it says record cue live in brackets, and that lets us know that our default is recording live, and that's perfect. And I'm going to hit cue number 1, and I'm going to hit enter. And now we've recorded cue 1. So a couple of things to understand is, number 1, it released all channels when you recorded the cue. That is by default. It is a setup option, so that can be changed, but that's advanced. Next thing is it put you in the queue. Now how do we know that? If we look in our sidebar, we can see that there's a blue background on cue 1. That means it is the selected queue. Then you have the yellow border around that, which identifies that as the active queue. So that is the queue that we are currently active in and that we are selected on. Why is it important to understand what queue we're selected on? Well, if right now I want to change time on the queue, all I have to do is hit the time key, give it a value, enter, and notice it said queue 1 time. If I had been selected on a different queue, just hitting time would have allowed me to change time on that selected queue. Other thing to note is color. So all of the color of the levels are a sky blue. That lets us know that the levels are going up from where they were previously, and since it's the first queue, that makes sense. So blue is the color of levels going up like the sky. And if we look here in our attribute window, this dark blue color is the level attribute information that has an instruction to change. I'm going to grab 1 through 9, put them at a lower value, and now we're going to record the next queue using a slightly simpler method. So instead of a 4-key approach, I'm going to do 3 keys. I'm going to say record to enter. And now that has recorded cue 2. So understand that using the record key defaults to cue. So we have 2 new colors to look at. On 1 through 9, the color is green. Green is the level of colors going down, because green is down like the grass. And purple. So purple is on everything that has not changed, and that includes parameters. So purple is a tracked value, or value that has not changed from its previous queue. All right, now we're going to add some other channels, and I'll just put those to full, and we're actually going to turn over queue numbering to the desk. I'm just going to do record enter, and that has recorded the next whole number in the queue list. I am now going to grab some more channels and turn those on, and I'll do the last way to record a queue, which is actually just hitting the record button twice. Now again, that turns over queue numbering to the Neo, but it will advance, it will record the next queue at the end of the queue list, and it advances by 1. Now let's talk about navigating the queue list. First thing is, if you want to release the queue list, you have a button that's called Release Queue List on your playback tile. You press that, it will release the queue list. Now, standard operation of the queue list will be with go. First press will run Q0, and then you can press go. You can see the progress bar. While running a queue, I can hit stop back. It will pause the queue. If I press it again, it will restore the previous queue. If you're sitting in a queue, stop back will go to the previous queue. Also on your playback tile, you have go to. Go to will allow you to go to a specific queue. So I could say go to 3 enter, and that will go to that queue in the go to time, not in the queue time. You also have step up, which will go back a queue in the go to time, step down, which will go to the next queue. You also have loads, so I could load 1, enter, and then press go, and then that will be in the next queue on the go to run in time. Okay, we're going to look at recording groups. So I am sitting in the queue, and that's on purpose. So I'm going to say 1 through 9 full, and from here I'll say record group. Notice it says selected, meaning that it's only going to take the channels that are selected, so that it does not matter that I'm sitting in the queue. Everything will be just fine. So I'm going to say 1, enter, and that has recorded that group. It's also important to understand that with Neo, groups include level and fixture data. So full is part of that group. All right, now let's look at applying the group. So the first thing we need to do is release the channels, and then we can do group 1 full or group 1 at any value. Now to see what the data is, we just open up the group display, and here we will see group 1, the channels that it contains, and down here in the detail in the overview and DMX is the data. All right, now let's look at recording submasters. I'm going to start with the same channels, 1 through 9 at full, and I have released the queue list before I started this. So I'm going to say record sub. Notice it says active. Active means all channels with a level above 0. So anything that has intensity will be recorded. If you want to record a different style, you have your soft keys that show you all of the different options. But I'm going to continue and say record sub 1. Now you have to release before you can activate it, because those capture channels take priority, and now we can bring the sub up. Notice we have a new color, yellow. Yellow is the color of levels coming from submasters. All right, let's look at the submaster data. These are actually part of groups, because a sub is just a slider that's been assigned to a group. So if we look at our group display, we see a new one here as 1001, and that is submaster 1. Because they are groups, what we've done is offset the submasters by 1000, so they start above 1000 to keep from any overlap happening on groups. That's actually a value that you can change in system properties. But we can take a look here. Here's the submaster column, and we can sort by that if we wish. I'll go back to sort by numbering, and there's submaster 1, and if we select it, there are the channels. We can go down and see the data here, and obviously you can change it within this table. All right, now we're going to learn about effects on Neo. Effects on any console can be daunting, and we've tried to make them simple. There are several different effect engines for different ways to create effects, but primarily the easiest way to get started with effects on Neo is through the effects library. The effects library is populated with all of the effects shown here, regardless of your show file. So it always will start with these available for you. So if you look at the background color, they will tell you what the effects apply to. So the olive green applied to intensity, the primary green applied to position, the red applied to color, the purple or magenta applied to zoom, and the cyan applied to iris. So the best way to get started is select a set of channels, go to the effect library, and select the effect that you want. We're going to start with effect 1, the square wave wrap. So notice that I didn't apply an intensity before I applied the effect, because the effect will provide that for you. However, if you do apply an intensity, it will use that value. So if I now say at 5 enter, they will now be doing the effect from 0 to 50 rather than from 0 to full. If I say full, then they'll go back. You could also range channels here, so I could say at 10 through 90, and they will now do the effect based upon the level per channel. So I'm going to go back to full just for the demonstration purposes here. So once you have the effect running, you have 4 parameters that can be adjusted, and we're going to talk about what those are. Notice here in the sidebar, in addition to fixture control and current playback, you now have a new tab called Library Effect Control. Within that, you have 4 parameters: length, offset, scale, and stagger. Notice they can be adjusted here, or they can be adjusted from your encoders on the right side of your console. So let's first talk about length. Length is the time that it takes the effect to run. So the shorter the length, the faster the effect. The longer the length, the slower the effect. Offset is essentially the base point of the effect. In terms of intensity effects, that will be the low value, or where it starts from. Scale is how far the effect goes from the offset value. So scale is going to be the high value when talking about intensity effects. Now stagger determines how much delay is applied to each channel when the effect begins. Let's play a little bit with length. As we increase the length and I'm using my encoders, we see that the response of it slows down. As I decrease the length, the response of the effect speeds up. I'm going to manually put it back to around the default of 2 seconds. Offset. Again, this will be the base value. So as I take offset up, notice offset is a DMX value. So if I put offset at 127, you'll see the effects. The effect is now going from 50 to full on each of the channels. And I'm going to put offset back to 0. Actually, I'm going to put it back to relative, which means it will take any relative value, or it'll take the Q value. So scale, again, is the high value. So scale would normally be at full, or at 100%, and as I bring it down, notice that it truncates. So if I put scale at 80%, now the effect is going from 0 to 80. And I'm going to put it back to full for the demonstration. And we're going to look at stagger. The easiest way to learn and understand about stagger is to put it down to 0. You can go below to auto, which will auto increment the number of channels that you have, but I'm going to put it at 0. Notice when it's at 0, all of the channels are doing the exact same thing because there is no stagger to be provided on the selected channels. As I slowly move stagger up, you can watch a slight ripple start, and the greater the stagger, the greater the ripple. So that's the way to assign an effect and to manipulate its parameters live. So with the effect running and the parameters the way you want to, it's time to record the effect. The simplest way to do this is just record the cue and have it record and create the effect at the same time. So we're going to hit the record key. What this does is a couple of things. It brings you back to your sidebar in the current playback tab so you can see your cue list. Also, so you can see your record modifiers as to whether this is going to include the effect that's running or not. Remember, if it's red, it will not include it. If it's yellow, it will include it, and we definitely want it to include it. So I'm just going to hit record again to complete the recording process, and here we have a new cue. It has a flag on it that says effect 1 because it has taken the library effect and created the show based effect. So it is no longer running from the library. We can come in here, see it's not selected, and we can open up our effect list and we can see that indeed here is effect 1. Here are the channels that's controlling. Here is the attribute that is assigned to. Here's the profile that it is performing, and there are the parameter settings of the effect. Continuing, if I grab another set of channels and provide them with a level and record the next cue, because we're still recording with effects turned on, it will include this effect in the next cue, and we can see that by the flag on Q6. As we continue this, it will continue to include the effect. If we're at a point where we want to record the next cue and have it fade the effect because we're done with it, if you look in your sidebar, there's a new context sensitive tab called Cue Effects, and we can go in here and hit stop, and then I can record the next cue, and now we're done. And the effect will fade in the cue time. Now let's quickly finish up by looking at color effects from the effect library. So I've already selected my LEDs and I've provided them a level of full. I'm going to go into the effect library and I'm going to select the very first one, which is Rainbow Chase. So here they are doing the default Rainbow Chase. I have my length, offset, scale, and stagger that I can manipulate just as I did on the intensity effect. And when I have that adjusted correctly, I can do the same thing that I did with my intensity effect. I can just record the next cue, and there I have the color effect running. So let's look in the effect list, and we can see our Rainbow Chase effect number 2. There are the channels, there's the parameter, and it applies to hue, so it's applying to all colors. And there's the profile, it's doing a step profile, and there is the parameter information. So that's it. That's the end of our introductory video for software version 3.9. So for more information, there are more training videos on the Strand Lighting website. Please go there, download, and enjoy. Thanks for watching.